Camera phones, slideshows, selfies, images play a huge role in our lives, so much so they're forever changing the way we communicate and engage with one another. Let's get into this. Joining us now in New York via Skype, Peter Vidani. He's creative director at Tumblr, and with us here in the studio, Rita Leisner. She's an award-winning photographer and lecturer at the University of Toronto. Barry Quinn, executive creative director at Juniper Park. That's a Toronto-based ad agency. And Paul Roth, he's director of the Ryerson Image Center. And Peter, it's good to have you on the line from New York City via Skype, and to you three here in the studio, welcome to TVO. Nice to meet you all for the first time. We have just heard, and I know you have all seen the images that Robert Burley brought to our attention, that chronicle the collapse of a century-old way of doing things, some of the finest Kodak, Polaroid, finest old companies that we know about. So this may seem like an odd opening question. Peter, let me go to you in New York for this first. Are we actually living in what could be characterized as the golden age of photography now?
Well, there's certainly more photos than there ever were before, but it's hard to consider what qualifies a golden age. If we're saying that it's more accessible, and if we believe that accessibility is the answer to an increasing quality, then yes. If it's regarding the invention of photography, which is also quite interesting, though limited in accessibility, then that has already happened clearly. But right now, it is almost free and infinite, and it's possible that it is now.
Rita, what's your view? Are we in the golden age?
Well, I definitely think that we're in a really optimistic time, and I agree absolutely that the accessibility of photography is going to have an effect on the quality of images made. It's just like making reading and writing accessible to people. I see with my first-year students instantly that they can make pretty good portraits, much better than people older than me could make who aren't used to using cameras a lot, so they have a real facility with that. I would say that they have a lot to learn outside of perhaps basic portraiture, and there's a big discussion to be had about the context of using imagery, but golden age.
You sound like
I think we don't even know, I think we've just begun. I think the golden age is perhaps still to come.
Okay. Paul, accessible, free, infinite, these sound like good ways of describing a golden age. Do you think we're in it?
It's really tough to say because photography has many uses, and I think accessibility has always been the progressive arc of this technology. Photography has gotten more accessible from its very first appearance in the 1830s. Now we take photographs on our phones. In other words, the photographs exist largely as communication. They are immediately sent as messages. They're shared. So I will agree with this theory. If you believe that the democratization of image making, the ability to use images as language, if that is what photography is all about, and that's your view of photography, then absolutely, we're in an extraordinary transformative period.
You're saying if, though?
If, because some people feel otherwise. There are people who make photographs as art, who function largely as painters do. And for them, democratization and the proliferation of image making can be a little frightening.
Doesn't necessarily equate quality.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right.
Gotcha.
So it really depends on your view.
Barry, what's your view?
It's a moment in time. They're all moments in time. So probably we have the death of the photograph and the birth of the image. Because, people will say, oh, but photography used to capture life. But not really, because anybody who's old enough to remember taking pictures with film, you went away for a long weekend and you took 48 photos. So you weren't really capturing the long weekend. You were capturing 48 moments, and everything was like, stand still, everybody, nobody move. And you had to compose this reality to get the right shot because...
Well, and every picture cost money, so you didn't want to take too many.
And a third of them were terrible and out of focus and terrible. So probably what my generation and generations before, and purely at the beginning, thought a photograph was, hasn't existed in a long time anyway. My kids have probably taken more photos this year than I had of my entire childhood. So for them, a photograph is like a disposable image.
You made that distinction. The distinction between a photograph and an image.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Well, because I say that on purpose because we keep calling it the same thing, but it's not the same thing. One was at one point it was the height of technology, and it was elitist, and it was expensive, and you had to have a technical knowledge to do it. And it was a moment in time, and it was difficult, and everything took time, so it was quite measured and quite precise. And you know, photojournalists, you just kind of reamed off film. That was a new idea because no photos were like that before. And then now to my children, it's a little bit like, example would be, remember when long distance telephone calls were an event and you would talk loud so your grandparents could hear you? And now it's like, I'm downloading songs from Sweden, what's the big deal? So I think it's probably, outside of the artistic circles, the true photograph has probably been dead for like 5 years at least.
I want to get some better understanding, and Peter, I'll start with you again on this one, of why it is. Why that is. I'm looking around this table here. I'm operating under the assumption that you all have cell phones or portable cameras or whatever you want to call them on you right now, smartphones. You know, our friend out of town here, Tumblr, this is their thing. We've got Facebook and we've got Twitter, and everybody's, I mean, the images, to use your word, are omnipresent. Selfies, this is the word of the year according to the Oxford English Dictionary. We saw the President of the United States taking a selfie at Nelson Mandela's funeral. Peter, why is modern life drawn to images in general and photographs, if that word even exists anymore, in particular? What's the lure?
Well, I think it coincides perhaps with what the internet is all about. The internet takes us to new places. We can talk to people that we would have never speaking to before. We can learn about things firsthand, immediately, without being there. In a way, the photograph has always done that. The photograph has taken us to places, past or present, where we couldn't have gone to before. And those two things existing together is a pretty powerful notion that we can be anywhere in time and place for the first time in history. And I don't know if we're totally meant to do that or if we're accustomed to it yet, but it's happening and we're drawn to it heavily. The internet and photography are a good pair right now. Imagine those two things in the broader idea of being able to go any place at any time is really what we're attracted to.
Let me quote from Ian Brown, who writes in the Globe and Mail. He's an author. He's hosted numerous programs at this place over the years. Here's what he had to say. When did he have this? Oh, this was earlier this summer. Follow along, control room, if you would. Maybe it's harder to be moved by a photograph these days because there are so many of them. The numbers are inconceivable. Photography has always had its cheesy side. By the 1960s, 55% of all pictures taken were of babies. But there are more than 2.6 billion camera phones on the planet today. Facebook alone has been known to upload 6 billion photographs in a month. We snap as many pictures today, every 2 minutes, as were taken in the entire 19th century, another boom time for photography. The volume alone guarantees that most are forgettable. So why do we take them? For the same reason addicts are addicted to anything, to kill the pain of awareness, the uncomfortable difficulty of actually seeing. I admit that this is just a theory, but I watch tourists take the same 4 photographs minute by minute, hour by hour, day after day in downtown Banff, and it's a strangely upsetting experience. We crave the instant gratification and collective approval that the internet deals out to us, and photograbs are the fastest way to get it, the visual equivalent of a hypodermic drip. What do you think?
It's pretty cynical.
Too cynical?
Yeah, I mean, here's the reality.
He's a good writer, though, eh?
Yeah, I work in the advertising design world, came up through the business as a designer. For years, for like most of mankind, we have had a hold over everybody else because we could create things that other people couldn't. We could express ourselves in ways that other people couldn't. You know, before people had turntables to do mixes and whatnot, you had to really learn how to play an instrument. Creating music was impossible. We all know
it's yellow, black, red,
now it's a
yellow.
little bit easier. Yeah. You know, I think people love images because they want to tell the world a little bit about their point of view. They want to document it there. They want to share. Photos are easy. Writing is just as omnipresent, but writing is hard. Crafting a decent letter or email is still hard. That's why we like to do like one sentence, a sentence and a half if we can. But snapping a photo adding a filter, putting some kind of ironic phrase and uploading it is pretty low barrier to entry for most people. And so I think what we're seeing is that photography might become like another version of oral language, where people are sharing words through pictures, and sharing pictures of things that they can't express in words.
What do you think, Rita?
Yeah, I think that the accessibility, certainly, of photos on smartphones, particularly self-portraiture. I mean, why is there so much self-portraiture? Because it's very easy to give yourself permission to take your own photograph. And getting accessibility to report other people's stories, say, as one does in journalism, is a much more difficult venture, as it is to create a well-crafted conceptual body of work like Bob Burley's. Definitely this mass proliferation of imagery doesn't mean that everyone's going to become Bob Burley, just like giving everyone pens doesn't turn everyone into Alice Munro. But hopefully, you know, perhaps there will be more of them. So we're able to make images more readily, but I think that there's a kind of a lack of basic ground level education on how to interpret and edit. So we do get these like crazy collections of often very bad images. Like, I'm always astounded when people post really terrible images, particularly of myself, because I notice it on the internet. And I think, well, can't they see that that's a bad photograph of me? I mean, I take people's portraits for a living, and I can tell, oh, don't ever show, you know, Steve Paikin this picture of him because he's an extremely handsome man, and this is a terrible likeness, and I don't want him to have that stuck in his head, you know? But people can't tell that, and that fascinates me.
So there's an illiteracy around images and photography out now that bothers you, and it's there because we're so narcissistic. We don't care if the images are bad.
No. I think that people can't tell. Like my parents are my parents. I picked because my father's off. I shouldn't say my father is a good photographer. I don't want to get into that. It's terrible. But someone thinks it's a good picture of you, and they can't tell the difference. It's not malicious at all. It's just that they're not educated in being able to understand how light reflects on someone's face. I mean, photography is not just this blah out of a cell phone. It's still artistry with light. Like, it doesn't matter how many devices we have, we need light to make it. It's painting with light. I personally work a lot with lighting. We're being lit right now. You know, your lighting guy was like, oh, you need to,
it's not just point and shoot.
It's not just point and shoot. It can be, but just like writing, you can write nonsense or unedited whatever, and everyone knows about writing that it gets better when you edit it. So why wouldn't photography be the same? I believe it's the same. I believe that learning photography education should be part of the 3 R's.
Paul, your view on whether, well, first of all, is Ian Brown's piece too cynical, as Barry suggested?
So.
It is?
I really think so. I think that it reminds me of that feeling that we get when we're young, when we hear somebody older than us who doesn't understand what's going on. I don't mean to be so critical, but it's a view that's based on a certain set of expectations about what photography is and how it functions and what it means. And the fact is that saying that the millions of photographs that people take of children, of their nieces and nephews, that those are cheesy or that they're worthless or that they're easily forgotten is, I think, just wrong. For many people, taking a photograph of their child or their dog is a very profound act. It's a simple act, but it's quite profound.
10,000th time?
Well, absolutely, because it's like constantly reminding yourself what you're here for, what you care about, sharing information, sharing an image of a loved one with another loved one. Communication is what photography's always been about, and I think that it's not really right to apply the standards and values that someone like Robert Burley observes to photographs that are made for entirely different purposes. I really think that they're just apples and oranges.
It'd be like saying there's no point ever writing in a journal.
Exactly.
Because if you write in a journal every day, do you then spend another lifetime reliving the lifetime you wrote about? No, it's the act of just writing in the journal, and that's what I think is happening. And I agree that people can't take great photos, but I have to say, on measure, people's aesthetic judgments are far better now than they've ever been. Are they on par with
Joseph Karsh?
Or with professionals? Absolutely not. but they're actually not trying to do that anyway. Until you open up an agency like mine, in which case they are. But you know, but everybody's a critic, I think, because everybody is also a creator. Are they a good creator or a bad creator? That's a different conversation. But it's strange now that there's almost nobody who, you know, in the Western world who doesn't take photos, document things, share things, have favorite colors, favorite fonts. That wasn't true 20 years ago.
But let me try this with Peter. Peter, back in my day, I'm sounding like an old fogey here, but back in my day, we did what Barry suggested earlier. You went out, and I think, what was there, 24 pictures on it was either 12 or 24.
36. Yeah.
Right, something like that, images on a roll of film. And you went and you shot them, and a bunch of them were lousy, and you took it to the drugstore, and a week later you got it back, and there might be a handful of images in there that were worth putting in an album, so that at some point in the future, you would go back and look at these things and relive the moment, and it would give you a warm, fuzzy feeling. You, at Tumblr, for example, are one of many social media who have now enabled us to, with so much proliferation, upload these pictures. Do they have the same kind of meaning or shelf life or purpose in our lives that the old way did?
No. Simply put, they don't. But keep in mind that when you were taking photographs and you were hoping for a few good ones, you were hoping for a few technically good ones. I mean, there was a lot that went into that photograph. There was, you know, the f-stop. There was the lighting. There was the exposure. Did you remove the lens cap? There was a good chance a lot of those just didn't come out visible. Now, that aside, now that every photo is basically good and legible, comparing it to, you know, a language, it's legible. And they're able to be seen. They're able to be shared. One thing that I think we're all kind of getting at is that photography isn't necessarily about communication anymore. On the internet, it definitely is. I mean, it's sort of built into it that way, but it's also very personal. And what we see on Tumblr is a lot of people using their blogs to collect things for themselves. So this photo is sure, it's to share, and I'm saying something with it, but it's also just sort of a log, you know, where the word blog comes from. It's a web log of my life that I want to remember. It doesn't necessarily have to be aesthetically pleasing, because when I look at the photo that I posted on the internet, I see something entirely different. I think we would all agree with that. And so it's nice for me to go back and be able to revisit that. That's one use of it. But back to your point, it doesn't have to be, I don't think it has to be aesthetically pleasing. It's a token. It's like, it's currency. You know, it's like, I went here, I got this thing. Other people have taken this photo of the Eiffel Tower before, but this one is mine. You know, you used to maybe put the penny into one of those roller things and flatten it with an imprint. It doesn't mean it was real currency. It just means that you went there and you got it. It was a token. That's what photography can be now.
Let me share the views of photographer Eamon McCabe, as quoted in The Guardian. He shoots pictures for The Guardian, and here's what he had to say about this just a few days ago. It's a scattergun approach. You snap away thinking, quote, one of these shots will work, rather than concentrate on capturing the image. He says, now I can shoot 1,000 pictures in one of these sessions on digital, and I give myself a massive editing problem as a result. I don't think photography's dead, it's just become lazy. People are taking lots of pictures, but nobody's looking at them. Photographer, is he right?
Well, as I was saying, I think earlier, I agree absolutely that editing is a really important thing. And it's, you know, yes, if it's your personal blog, that's one thing, but I don't want to read everybody's journal, or I can, it's my choice. But there are other ways of presenting, if you're trying to address, say, a serious topic, and you're concerned about the time of the viewer and what they're going to take out of the story, then it takes an enormous amount of crafting and editing. I mean, it can be years of photography followed by enormous amounts of editing. And it is great, we can take more pictures. You know, we're not shooting with 4x5 cameras where you're lucky to get a few shots a day. So that is for sure is true. But I also cannot let go the issue of it doesn't matter if photos are aesthetically pleasing. And I do get that there is an aesthetic of not standard aesthetics and lighting and whatnot, but speaking as a woman, I have to address the issue of the aesthetics of images of females, and to say that aesthetic pleasingness in pictures of women is irrelevant is, you know, obviously a whole other conversation, because we are still, if not even more, controlled by this sense of ideal beauty, particularly of women. So It's a big, big deal.
There is a gender gap on this.
Well, there's a gender gap, but to say that it's, I think men as well. I think people are conscious of how they appear. So to say it doesn't matter at all, I don't think that that's really the case. And also, as I was saying, I don't think people are deliberately putting forth images that, I just don't think they have that much control over it. And there is a beauty to that as well. But there's a place for controlling image like there is for a well-crafted piece of text,
I wasn't going to bring this up, but I got an email a few months ago from a woman who saw her picture on a blog post that I had done. It was related to politics. And she didn't like the look of herself in the picture. And she emailed me to say, could you please take that down? This is months after the fact. And I emailed back and I said, I don't think it's so bad. I think it's fine, actually. Mm-hmm. And she said, and it captured a moment at a public event that had some historic significance. And she said, well, I don't like it, and I think I look lousy, so please take it down. So I did, out of courtesy. That's never happened before or since. And I think what you're saying is it's not a coincidence that it was a woman who asked me to do that? Are you saying that?
No, I'm saying, well, there's for sure more pressure on women to be physically attractive than there is on men. That for sure. That's a societal
indisputable
thing. That's indisputable. Right. This one, I don't know. Martin Parr has a wonderful saying about this. He says that the only reason people don't like images of themselves is that they haven't accepted what they really look like. But people do look different in different kinds of pictures. I mean, if you catch a picture of me mid-speech in a still, and I'm like people don't look the same in a still frame as they do when they're animated.
Right.
And okay, this woman, yes. There are consensuses, like some people never like images of themselves, and I'm not really speaking about that. I'm just talking about the ones that you would look at and think, oh, this is funny, and if you're doing a photo shoot on an editorial assignment and you're like, no, his eyes are closed and he's going like that, you go, no, you don't show that to your client because they're not going to hire you again.
Right. So, okay, let's go to the ad guy on this one.
Yeah.
Advertising has obviously often used images to sell, and the phrase, an image is worth 1,000 words, I think that's an ad.
Probably.
That came out of advertising, I think, a long time.
If it's good, we'll claim it.
Okay. I think it came out of the ad world about a century ago. Given what we're discussing today, is the image/photograph still as powerful today for you in doing what you do as it might have been 25 or 50 years ago?
So it's the paradox we have to deal with. So images or photography has never been more important in humanity than it is now. As an idea. Each individual one is less important. Imagery for the novice has never been easier to produce a fantastic image. For the professional, never been harder. I know that sounds weird because we've heard that photography is lazy or whatnot. The act of maybe doing the photo, some of the magic is gone. We used to be able to say, this is the Polaroid, we'll have to see the real film, it'll be totally different. And there was sort of a trust that this magic happened with the photographer, and frankly they did. It was kind of like licking the batter, and tomorrow you'll get the cookies. But I think part of the problem now is that a broken watch is right twice a day, right? So the average person shoots off hundreds of photos. They take 2 or 3 fantastic photos. Yeah. They might get lots of likes. People might love their cat video or whatever. It's really a much harder job in a world awash in images to define a brand, to define a moment, to define a person, a time, or whatever, the way that images have in the past with Marilyn Monroe or Rolling Stones, you're looking at those photos, or brands, on purpose, to set out to do that. It's very, very difficult. I mean, in our industry, it's like you're setting out to write the single that's the #1 hit.
Yes.
That's very difficult. I think the challenge that we're having now is that we're at the tipping point right now, and we had conversations about images of women and whatnot. We can say that at one time, industry, corporations, communication channels like this, we kind of controlled the image landscape that people lived in for the most part. Homes were designed by architects for the most part in modern age. The images they saw on TV were curated and done by professionals. Most of the printed matter there were editors and art directors. Now, I've got 2 daughters, a preteen and a teenager. They will literally watch an hour and a half of Vine. They'll sit on their little Vines on their phone, like 7 seconds at a time. They'll be on their Instagram feed. The TV is not even on. They don't care. They will sit through that, and they will have looked through hundreds of images and little bits of entertainment content. By the way, designed specifically to be entertainment content. They didn't have accidentally be entertaining. People do little skits and stuff. And none of it is created by professionals. So for us, our challenge is you've got these billions of photos done by amateurs. And then you have a creative class that is larger and producing more images at a higher caliber. Now, when I'm saying they're better images, it's just that more of the images are better images. Fewer of the images are amazing images, probably, as a result. So to stand out in that kind of cavalcade of crap, it's almost impossible.
Peter, let me follow up with this. Tumblr, of course, is used, this is your organization. People blog with images mostly as opposed to text. And I wonder if we're nearing a point where people can really engage in discourse or conversation with images as opposed to text.
Well, theoretically, yes. I mean, we started out Tumblr in 2007, as a platform to do something that already existed. I mean, blogging was already there. Journalism on the internet was there. It just was pretty difficult to do. You had to have your own domain. You had to have your own hosting. The setup was hard. So we wanted to find an easy way to do that. But what happened was, because it was so easy, we attracted a wider audience. And the wider audience just wasn't as interested in that long-form writing. And we also were, at the time, an incredibly easy way to put an image from your computer onto the internet. And that is the part that has taken off. And that is primarily the way that people communicate. I mean, not like constructive sentences like you and I, would associate with language, but this is who I am. I am this stream of images. There is not a lot of added context here. And just by getting that information from somebody, you can sort of get an idea of who they are. It's a form of communication, and we see it largely as a form of identity.
Huh. Paul, is Tumblr or Pinterest or many of these other sites where you upload photos, is this a new language we're creating now?
I think so, in a way. I mean, you can argue semantics, but photography is translingual. And I think that the problem earlier that people face, and this speaks a little bit to what you mentioned, is that the photograph, or all photographs used to be objects, and they were hard to share. They were hard to carry. A 19th century landscape photographer made an image on a glass plate and then put it on the back of a mule and had to get it back unbroken over land to be able to use it and print it. Reproduction was difficult. Now these things are not issues anymore. The ability to communicate with people on the other side of the world in the blink of an eye has absolutely changed photography, so that in effect, when you had one object, the ambition for many people who care about these things was to reach as many people as possible. Envision the photograph of the flag raising at Iwo Jima. The goal was to get that picture in front of as many eyes as possible. Now that's not really a goal, I think. Smaller forms of communication can occur. Someone can do Tumblr, they can do Pinterest, and want to reach only those people who share their interests, but they can be anywhere, and they can look at it the next day or the next moment. And so communication is absolutely enabled by this I won't say wider proliferation of images, it's more like a cellular proliferation of images. It allows images to get to or to be accessed by ever smaller but ever more interested groups of people.
Peter, if this is a new language, let's put it this way. If we were talking about the English language here today and we wanted people to be better at it, we might give them tips on where to go study or learn grammar, or if they were immigrants, maybe English as a second language. We would point them to those courses so they could get better at it. How much responsibility do you at Tumblr feel, if this is a new language, to make sure people do it better and well?
That's a fascinating question, actually. I think to answer your first question, the way to get someone to learn a language, you want to learn Spanish, you go to Spain, you spend time in Spain, and eventually if you want to eat, you're going to learn how to speak it, the language. What we do here is, a lot of the problem solving that we do is introducing Tumblr to a brand new user, someone that has never been, someone who's just signed up for Tumblr before, has never used it. How do we get them to not only realize how great it can be and how we like to use it, but how do we get them to use it and to express themselves? And if the goal is to get people to express themselves, then what we actually focus on in the beginning is getting them to follow people. The follow mechanism of finding the best blogs on the internet, and you know, acting as a consumer for a while. By acting as a consumer, you sort of learn the syntax, and you learn, more importantly, how easy it is. There isn't a great wall to get over. You shouldn't feel intimidated about sharing a piece of content on the internet, because look at these hundreds of thousands of people doing it every second. So the first thing that we do is we try to expose you to our favorites and what we believe is the best that we have today. And inevitably, you just sort of pick up, you know, that language, as we're saying, and you feel a lot more comfortable sharing.
Rita, is it ridiculous to posit that notion that the Tumblrs, the Instagrams, the Facebooks of the world have a bit of a responsibility to teach the vocabulary and the grammar of this new language?
Well, I spent a little bit of time on Peter's site, and it's, you know, he's very talented and he has a real vision, and it is an excellent example of the best that can be done with this kind of medium. You know, it's very poetic and touching at times and funny and, you know, masterfully done. And I do think that to read a site like that is a great kind of education. But, you know, there's this Monty Python skit where this character wanders around Paris with a dictionary that some jokester has given him where all the language is wrong. So he means to say something like, you know, which way to the museum, and instead he says, may I fondle your buttocks? And so there is still an issue, who are our teachers? I mean, who's teaching you Spanish? What dialect are you learning? Who has the authority? And I know I don't want to get into, I know it's very hierarchical to talk about authority, but still, I think it's, how do we still know how to read images? How do we know what's true? If we don't know who has made the image, how do we know what kind of context it should be in, or if it's true? I mean, this is why bylines are so important in news images, because if you don't know who's taken the photo, you can't really trust it. I mean, obviously the same with writing. So,
Peter, do you worry about that? We all know nowadays how easy it is to fix or fake or alter photographs. Is that a concern of yours?
Absolutely. That's a huge concern of ours. It's arguably our largest problem to solve is, you know, we take attribution very seriously. We will always side with the creators and those making original content put in on our site. And back to your earlier point, we do take that responsibility seriously when we are teaching our users and introducing what the network can be. It's something that we're learning ourselves.
I love the Wild West of it, though.
Yeah. No rules.
Yeah, because here's the reality. We have, look, most of it's going to be crap, but almost everything's crap. Most conversations are terrible. Most phone calls are inaudible. Most times people create things, they're average. It's the reality of life. Every now and then, a few people. So if you look at what happened with music, the electric guitar. So did Les Paul and Fender, did they have a responsibility to teach people music? No, and thank God they didn't, because the Sex Pistols happened. Lots of horrible musicians made stunning pieces of music. So, you know, you look at a statement like Four Lads from Liverpool. We don't understand what that means now, but there was a time when the most accomplished musicians were not four lads from Liverpool. They didn't even go to a proper school. They're not even playing. But because the electric guitar allowed you to have sustain, you could accompany yourself, you could create volume, and four people, you didn't need to have the Havana Club filled with a bunch of musicians to get sound. So all of a sudden, four people could make sound. And then, you know, they did that, and then after they solved that and they did arenas with complex music, the punk rock movement says, who cares? I mean, punk's basically invented the blog idea. Who cares if I'm any good? Who cares as long as somebody likes what I'm doing and I'm authentic and I'm a part of a movement, and they did the zines and all that. And then hip hop, you know, basically decided, who cares if I'm even playing something? It's been played before, I'm going to cut and paste. And if you look at the way people create content today, you kind of mash that up. So I'm sort of thinking, look, more people taking more images. The next diction, the next syntax might not be created by the people that we think actually control images. It might be created by some kids in their bedroom, which is what happened to music. And I think, for me anyway, music got better when more people were allowed to screw everything up. Yes, most garage bands are horrendous. Nobody listens to them.
How do you like the Wild West quality of things out there?
I think that's a perfect metaphor. It's the frontier, and we really are at a crucial moment in the creation of a new frontier. And I couldn't agree more. I think that, yes, we could sit here and try to define the parameters with which people are allowed to make good expressions. We could say that. We could attempt to, from our august positions, say this is the grammar and you must adhere to it. And that's fine. We can certainly do it. It's been done before. It was done to rock musicians. Yeah. It was done to the Beatles. It was said to the Sex Pistols as well. And then they will transgress. And it is out of that transgression that sometimes something crystalline and pure and beautiful and resonant and memorable comes out. And so that's really what we're all trying to get at here.
Let me give Rita the last 30 seconds here and try to keep it real. As somebody who has spent 25, 30 years learning how to do what you do and get really good at it, are you ticked off with a little bit of this conversation right now?
Well, I'll tell you a little story. And I actually do agree with all of you. I'm also excited by the possibilities. Yeah. But, you know, because I work in news imagery, there are other things at issue. But I'll tell you a story I told.
Got half a minute.
A half minute. Oh my goodness.
Do it. You can do it.
Shooting on an iPhone in Afghanistan, in Helmand province. And the master gunnery sergeant says to me, what does it feel like to shoot on an iPhone with all your experience? And I said, imagine if one day everything you'd learned, everything you'd mastered, all your skills, all your technology were suddenly replaced by a magic power Green Lantern ring that everyone could use. That's what it feels like.
You told that story in half a minute, and it was brilliant. Well done. Summarized it nicely. I want to thank everybody for joining us for this discussion tonight. Peter Vidani, the creative director at Tumblr in New York City. Good of you to join us on Skype today. Peter, thanks very much. There's Rita Leisner, the photojournalist who knows how to tell a story. Barry Quinn, the executive creative director of Juniper Park. And Paul Roth, the director of the Ryerson Image Center. Thanks so much, everybody.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.